Hi, and welcome to POV, your favorite political commentary show. And today, we're going to be talking about the state of Zim sports and, of course, some of the madness that happens with our footballers. So let's get it. Now, how is it possible that a sports governing body can charter officials and their supporters to an international tournament and fail to honor their commitments to the players involved? Now, it wouldn't be POV if we didn't try and answer this question. And for us, it all starts with the SRC, or the Sports and Recreation Committee. See, the SRC is a commission charged with governing all sports in Zimbabwe. The chief mandate is ensuring the proper administration of sports associations, which includes the prevention and policing of issues of corruption and mismanagement, as well as overseeing all things sports related, from the maintenance of facilities to fundraising and marketing for the various sports. Now, with most major sports associations embroiled in corruption and mismanagement cases, or having inadequate coaches available for more sports, or dilapidated facilities which were improved in 1995 for the All Africa Games. And of course, the SRC itself being entangled in a $2 million fundraising embezzlement scandal, or the $7 million debt overhanging itself, it's no small wonder that team sports are failing to perform, or that the officials could have their fan base travel with them to the tournament while their real fans can't even watch the game on TV. Now, in 2015, the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Education, Sports, Arts and Culture tabled a report on the state of sport in Zimbabwe. This concentrated on major sports, football, cricket and rugby, but the report, as many of them are, was shallow. And in terms of findings or recommendations, it only scratched the surface on the issues plaguing our sports. Now, it's been 5 years since this report came out, and the only thing that happened was that the teams and associations started having financial audits. But in typical Zimbabwean fashion, nothing happened from these. So in October last year, when our Youth, Sports, Arts and Recreation Minister, Ms. Kirsty Coventry herself, fired the board of the SRC, this move was largely praised in sports circles as a bold step in the right direction to fixing the problems of Zimbabwean sports administration and management. However, it then took months for a new board to be approved, owing to the bureaucratic processes, inexplicable blockades, and the minister leaving on maternity leave, on which, among very real sporting questions, we were also left wondering, so what does the deputy minister do? Well, deputy ministers have no powers to give directives or make decisions in the absence of their superior. Why? Because government policy is such that deputy ministers are additional resources to be deployed, but have no autonomy. They are stand-ins. And when the minister is unavailable to make a speech or attend a function or answer questions on policy, this is when they are allowed to shine. So in short, they're officially appointed stooges. Now, this might seem like a small issue or even a laughable one until you actually see it playing out in the real world. For example, St. John's College having to pay duty for their new AstroTurf when it should have been exempted on the basis of it being for educational purposes. However, in order to claim that exemption, the school needed a letter from the ministry stating that they should be exempt. Now, with the minister away and the deputy minister powerless, the letter took too long to come, leaving the school having to pay the duty on their own just to open the turf on time. Now, if they have the guts to follow up that case, they might get their money. But if not, that is a question that one has to answer a little bit later. So the big question is, what needs to be done? Now, speaking to some sports administrators and professionals, the common issues arising in team sports include the following. Associations are run by politically connected persons with little appreciation for the sport and competence in administration. A few years ago, the National Bodybuilding Association of Zim came under fire from their athletes for being repeat offenders of underfunding the sport and somehow always sending more officials to global events than athletes. Another issue was the transition from one administration team to another, which was often acrimonious and without regard for the previous institution's memory. This is because in most cases, a new broom sweeps clean mentality is always at play when a new administration has to come in owing to the foul play of the last one. And the real issue for our nation's sportspersons is the pay-to-play culture that is front and center of most sports, in our country. Now, this is not the pay to play that we often hear in the political spectrum. But given the lack of sustainable funding in certain sports, there's a growing reality that our players and athletes are having to pay their own way for tournaments, equipment, gym, additional coaching, and etc. And this automatically then means that it's not necessarily the most gifted or talented players that get to make the teams, but rather the ones who can afford to actually play the sport. Now, this is not something that is obviously sustainable, and this needs to be changed immediately. So let's delve a little bit deeper into some of the sports to understand what really is going on in some of these illustrious places of ours. Let's start with hockey. The men's, women's, and hockey teams traveled to South Africa in August for the 2020 Olympic qualifier tournaments. Now, this comes at a time when the other 7 African teams are already in camp, focusing on the goal, while our Zim team members are largely working their normal jobs full-time and then somehow trying to find some time to practice. And as a result, a litany of charges has been laid out against the Zimbabwe Hockey Board. And these are mainly administration and development related, but failure to develop the sport and manage it effectively, despite international funding for such programs being made available, has brought the hockey players associations to a point where they have effectively lost confidence in the sitting board and have called for the disbandment and has laid out their letter of no confidence recently to state their claims. Now, when it comes to rugby, the ZRU has often come under fire for not being able to have a professional league for the last 5 years that's well managed. And also, they don't really have a clear pathway from a player to come from grassroots right up to the professional level. And it's such fly-off-the-hip management that causes it to have issues such as a few players having to go to an academy-led tournament in South Africa, halting the league for up to 6 weeks with no explanation. It is no wonder, with such management, that when a special anti-corruption unit in the president's office was deployed to investigate the union, they found that $25,000 had gone missing, which was supposed to be dispersed to the Cheetah squad for their Sevens Rugby World Cup campaign. Now, from this, the ZRU board resolved to institute disciplinary proceedings against some players and to look into a special committee to find out why these issues happened. But the reality of it is that such gross misconduct has now led to the IRU reducing funds to the ZRU, which is a massive blow to the sport in general. And last but not least, football. The national pastime is perhaps the worst show of administration and government in sport in Zimbabwe. Each successive administration seeks to wipe out the other, and in so doing, repeats the same mistakes of the past. So from Cuthbert Dube to Fidza and now Fallon Kamambo, there is no positive change visible in the administration of the beautiful game. You see, despite a massive showing of financial support, with over $200,000 and more than 3.5 million RTGS contributed by the government and the corporate world for the 2019 Egypt AFCON tour, we still found the team threatening to boycott the opening match due to non-payment of agreed appearance fees, steering back from the COSAFA tournament a few weeks ago. And at the same time, a full contingent of ZIFA councillors and allegedly their base, as well as Warriors supporters, flew to Egypt via chartered flights with all expenses catered for. I'm sure you've heard this clip, but in case you haven't, here's a recap.
Quite a number of instructions. Probably the bank gave one person to do that. So I had to ask my VP to engage the bank so that the money is transferred right away.
And we understand some of the players, they didn't want to give their names, but they have said that they were not happy that you brought all of these councillors on the charter flights at Zifa's expense.
Yeah, the councillors are part of the football structures in Zimbabwe. This match, I think we qualified some months ago, and we had planned that the councillors will also attend the AFCON as a benchmarking program so that they see where we want to get to. It's not like what is being said that we are paying them 400. We have actually not paid them anything. But what is important is they must come and see how these big tournaments are organized. They are part of football and they must attend this. Being part of football, they are also the supporters of the Warriors.
So you want to expose them to football at this level, but are you giving them allowances or it's just flights and accommodation?
It's flights and accommodation because we don't have money to that effect to give them the allowance.
Money.
But then some of them have been allowed to bring girlfriends as well?
Not that. We have a list which, if I had it now, I will show you. We have a list that we have. We have councillors that are coming, which came in that charter plane. We also had the reporters that came in that charter plane. We also had supporters, the cheer warriors.
So as you can see, the administrative problems in Zimsport are largely the same, despite some of the specific disciplines. And this is where we feel the SRC should play a guiding role as a chief regulator within the country and bringing sanity to sport in general. It's good to see that a new board has been put in and they've already started wanting to get the ball running. They've got a large task ahead of them, but we are positive and hoping that they will try and do their best by the nation's sport and its pastimes. I don't have much to say when it comes to sport, but the one thing I can definitely think about is that as a nation, we need to be developing in more ways than one. I know that everyone's mind is focused on the economy, particularly focusing on today or yesterday's announcement of the Zim dollar, but things like sport allow us to have more avenues than one to create employment, to create a future, and to create hopes and dreams for young people. So what I'm saying is this. If the SRC actually realizes that they're not in charge of the hobbies of this country, but actual avenues of change, hope, inspiration, and employment, they might actually start to realize that sport in this country is almost as important as everything else, bread and butter. This is Kuda Mangwe, wishing you a good morning, a good afternoon, and a good night.